We are continuing our coverage of the final night of the Democratic National Convention here in Chicago. Things are already revving up, as you can see. Lots to talk about, so let's bring in our political panel, Kadia Goba and Jasmine Wright. Kadia is a politics reporter for Semafor. Jasmine is a politics reporter for NOTUS. And Jasmine, you are right down there in the middle of it all. What's going on?
Listen, Michael Jackson is playing. The crowd is dancing. I can hear people really shaking it behind me. They're really pumped up for this speech, something that has really been a quick movement, obviously only 4 weeks since Harris went on top of the ticket, but they're excited to see their new Democratic nominee, and I think really hear about her vision for America, something that I know that aides for the vice president say that she is going to really expand upon for her speech.
Kadia, as we look at women jumping up and down because they're so excited by what they're seeing on the stage tonight on night 4. We've talked so much about what Harris needs to do tonight and what she plans to do tonight, but you've been talking to Democrats attending this convention about what they want to hear from her. What are they telling you?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because it's a mix. When I talk to a lot of black women, they say, well, we want her to be herself. We want her to show her confidence that we know she has and really project that. And they feel like as vice president, you know, she kind of didn't have that opportunity. They want to see that front and center. But then when I speak to people in rural Nebraska, they are elated that, you know, their state and their area has such a prominent, or especially yesterday, had such a prominent, you know, voice on the stage. And they said, they told me, you know, frankly, Democrats, they felt kind of ignored them and really focused on the coastal states. So they are really elated. They feel like, you know, the same issues that coastal states have, they also are going through with housing and healthcare, and they'd like to see that they're front and center.
When you have spoken to black women, have they talked to you at all about how or if they want her to talk about race tonight, especially after Donald Trump made a point of saying that she had somehow turned black recently or had ignored that part of her heritage, when that is obviously not the case?
You know, when I speak to most black women, they say she doesn't have to discuss that. She's front and center. You see her as a woman of color. It's not even relevant if she addresses them. And I remember doing some reporting and talking to members on the Hill who said, we have her back. We'll do that for her. But they don't feel she needs to do that. It's pretty obvious who she is.
That's interesting. You know, Jasmine, it's such a tall order because here you have the vice president speaking on night 4. People have already listened to dozens of speeches, people firing up the crowd like we're watching them be fired up right now. You heard really masterfully delivered speeches from Michelle Obama and Barack Obama and Bill Clinton and even her own running mate, Tim Walz. How high a bar does she have to get over tonight, especially when you've had multiple speakers saying that she has this incredible joy that she is going to convey to the American people tonight?
Yeah, well, I think the bar is sky high, and I actually think that this is something that the vice president knows. I was talking to somebody very close with her just about 30 minutes ago, and they say that she knows, she understands just the amount of pressure that this moment commands from her, but they feel that she's ready to live up to it. Something that I reported on for today is just like kind of the meticulous preparation that she has gone through in getting this speech to where it needs. They worked on this speech weeks before the president said that he would not remain in the race. And instead of just throwing it away, they actually retooled it, saying to me that really the message remained the same. And it's really a meticulous process going back and making sure that they find the right messaging, because the vice president is somebody who recognizes just the amount of scrutiny that she is in, and that every word that she utters is really going to be picked apart, not just by Republicans, of course, but also by Democrats who are really looking to understand how she will govern. Maybe not the details, but the overarching broad strokes of how she would govern as president. And so I think that that is what they recognize is the very high bar. Not necessarily that she has to be the best speech giver like Michelle Obama, like President Obama, but she has to be the most authentic version of herself. That is what people are hoping to see, as well as a real clear vision for the future, not just in contrast with the former president, but also just for the American people. And so I think that is what the bar is, Nancy.
Jasmine, there have been literally dozens, if not hundreds, of speakers over the past 4 days, and yet we have not heard from a Palestinian American, which is something that the protesters outside of this arena have been calling for. Even the United Auto Workers today released a statement saying that they should allow a Palestinian American to speak on stage to talk about the conflict in the Middle East. What have you learned about why the campaign and organizers have decided not to let that happen?
Yeah, well, I think that the fire is actually really on the campaign's feet to have tried to make this happen before the conclusion of these 4 days. Obviously, the vice president is somebody who a lot of folks thought was more empathetic to the Palestinian cause and the victims of the Israel and Gaza conflict than former President Biden. I think over the last 4 days, we saw a much smaller protesting foot at the DNC than I think was thought of when President Biden was still on the top of the ticket. But I think that they will have to answer questions going forward as to why they didn't make time in the schedule for a Palestinian American to explain or to tell America about the plight that they feel that their people are feeling. And I don't think that, obviously the conclusion is going to happen tonight and it's going to be a rah-rah for Democrats and they're going to be excited. They're going to understand that they're going into the next 7 or so days really feet to the floor trying to make Vice President Harris President Harris. But of course, this issue is going to continue to follow them. And I think that they're going to find that they potentially have a problem by not letting a Palestinian American speak tonight, the last day of the DNC convention.
What do you think, Kadia? Do you think that this is going to be a mistake that follows this campaign, particularly when it comes to progressive voters or younger voters who are disappointed, or is all that going to get forgotten once this convention is over?
No, I do think it's going to be an ongoing issue, not specifically whether Palestinian Americans were allowed on stage, but just the issue at hand. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on the Vice President to make some substantial promises probably, or just make a commitment out there. So, yeah, I think this is not going to end. And I think we'll keep seeing this within the next 80 days.
Particularly as we head into the fall and you've got students returning to campuses all around the country. Kadia Goba, Jasmine Wright, thank you so much for your insights this evening. I really appreciate it.